What's going on, everybody? I'm Patrick from POWLAX, and in this video we're going to dive into a subject that is causing a ton of stress to players, parents, and coaches in the lacrosse community, and you know I'm talking about recruiting. And so this isn't going to be a video on how players should get recruited. It's more so a video where I can share my experiences as a player who grew up in Colorado and was recruited to play Division III out in Maryland, as well as my experiences as a coach who really wants to see my players succeed and accomplish their dreams of playing at the next level, as well as my experiences as a coach who has seen the recruiting community and the landscape just change so much. So if you're looking for a video on how to get recruited, there are a ton of other videos on YouTube that you can check out about that. We're going to touch on a couple of the subjects within this video, but we're not going to cover it exclusively. So to give you guys a complete picture of why my beliefs are my beliefs regarding recruiting, I've got to talk about my playing career. And so I found lacrosse when I was 5 because one of my older brother's friends was playing. He wanted my brother to play. And then once my brother decided to play, and he brought that stick into the house, our entire family changed from a soccer-oriented family into a lacrosse-oriented family. And so we would spend time on Thanksgiving throwing the ball around and hitting the wall, trying to break this little wooden doghouse that we had. We'd take shots at that. And so I grew up having a nice little family community where I could practice at all times. And so every Memorial Day, we would actually get to watch lacrosse on TV. And the only team that was there consistently year in, year out was Syracuse. I think during that stretch, they had 22 semifinal appearances in a row, which is absolutely incredible. And so growing up watching Syracuse all those years, I wanted to go to Syracuse. I idolized Ryan Casey and Mike Powell, and our family number was 22 and their number was 22. So I wanted to go to Syracuse, and I knew it from a very young age that that's what I wanted to do. When you look at me as a player, I found the game pretty early respective to other players in Colorado, and it was a lot of that big fish in a little pond type story where I was pretty good as far as a lacrosse player in general, but I was really good for where I was. And so when it came time to start looking at colleges, I had a ton of people telling me a ton of different things. They said, figure out the academics first, make sure that you are choosing a school based on what you want to study. But I was in high school. I didn't know what I wanted to study. The only thing I knew was that I wanted to go play lacrosse. And then when it came to the lacrosse side, it was email college coaches and let them know that you want to go to their school, make sure you're going to camps and clinics, make sure that they know where to find you. And so as I did that, I ended up emailing a bunch of schools that I most likely wouldn't have had a place on the team for. I wasn't a good enough player to play D1, even though I was pretty darn good in Colorado. So I reached out to my high school coach, and he had some connections with DU, and I ended up going to a couple of DU camps, and pretty much without even really looking, I took 2 trips to go to 2 colleges. One was Elmira out in upstate New York, and the other was Goucher College. And Goucher found me through the DU camp. And so I ended up choosing to go to Goucher College. I played there my freshman season and had a pretty good year. I had 9 goals as a freshman. I got a good amount of playing time. It was a pretty good experience. And so then 2 days before my first game, my sophomore year, I tore my ACL and was totally out. And at that point in time, I realized I did not like where I was, because prior to tearing my ACL, I was at a school, I was a part of the lacrosse team, and everything was going really well. But without that one thing, without lacrosse, I was absolutely miserable. I started sitting on a lawn, hanging out with the wrong kind of crowd, and I really just wasn't happy once I didn't have lacrosse. So I decided to make the decision to come back to Colorado and go to CU. So when I transferred back to CU, I took an entire year off to make sure that my knee rehabilitated right. And the following fall, I got hooked up with CU's men's lacrosse program. And the first thing that I noticed was that the lacrosse experience at CU, which is an MCLA club ball program, and Goucher College were entirely more similar than I ever thought. The brotherhood was there, the trainings were there, we were working on stuff almost every day, and the community aspect of it was pretty much the same. We were playing lacrosse, had a bunch of buddies on the team, and playing was just a blast. And so then in the following spring, we had our grade requirements, right? And the grade requirement for MCLA is a 2.0 cumulative GPA. For CU, it's 2.25. And I actually ended up having a 2.23. So I missed the cutoff by 0.02 in my cumulative GPA and couldn't play for CU that season. And so instead of playing and dwelling on the fact that I couldn't play, I decided I would coach. So I got hooked up with Icon Lacrosse out there and I began my coaching career. So I tell you that story to give you some framework on my three main things that I usually tell my players when it comes time for them to start making decisions about where they want to go to college and whether or not they want to play in college. The first is that the college that you pick needs to fit your personality most of all, as well as the interests that you have. So my backing for this is Goucher College is a tiny school. It was 1,200 kids, and I went to a high school of 3,000 kids. And once I didn't have kind of that embracing community in the lacrosse world where I was playing and I felt like an active part of it, I was absolutely miserable when it came time to just being a part of a small school. So if you want a small school, make sure you're focused on those. If you want a big school, make sure you focus in those. But it's way more important that the personality of the college fits you rather than things like, oh, this is a great engineering school, you should go there just strictly for the academics. Both things should fit. And when you think about the interests of a high school kid, a lot of times they don't know. They just want to be able to go feel their way out and then figure out what they actually want to do. So if you don't know what you want to do, pick a school that has a lot of options so that if you need to switch what you want to study, you absolutely can. I ended up switching what I wanted to study actually 3 times. In high school, I wanted to do psychology, and then I switched it to computer science because there was a lot of money in it. Then I switched to business because there's a lot of money in it. And then I ended up switching back to psychology because that was originally what I wanted to do, and that's what I was passionate about. The second piece of advice I have for players is not to sweat the names of NCAA, D1, D2, D3, then MCLA, D1, D2, and JUCO and all of those things. Because when you're thinking about a college, you should be thinking about your experience. And the experience from my understanding of a Division III NCAA school and a Division I MCLA school is that they're pretty similar. And so you're still going to be a part of a team. You're going to have that brotherhood. You're going to get to play the sport you love. And so it's more important to pick somewhere that fits your own personality so that if lacrosse ever does become something that you cannot do, that you can fall back on the fact that you're at a place that you enjoy. For me, it comes down to the fact that if I could go back and switch one thing, I wouldn't switch anything, but I have had the thought a lot about the fact that I should have probably gone to CU first and just enjoyed the club community there rather than going across the country. The third piece of advice that I have for players who are trying to find a school from the perspective of a player who has done it, it's to make sure you're focusing on academics, and that comes in 3 forms. First, you need to make sure that the school that you're going to has at least 2 or 3 things that you're interested in so that if you decide you want to go in another path, you can continue to stay at that school while trying to take that other path. The second part is that it has to, once again, fit your personality. It should be a place that is conducive to how you study and how you tackle academics. And that is different for absolutely everybody. And the third and most important one is focus on your academics now. I got a $17,000 grant for academics leaving high school, and I had a 3.0 GPA. I got a 26 on my a 23 on my ACT and a 1200 on my SAT. Not hugely exceptional academic scores, but I still got some money. The bottom line is that there's 9 times more money to go to college out there for academics than there is for lacrosse. So if you can focus on your academics as well, you'll have a much better chance of, one, getting into a school that you really want to go to, as well as getting some money to pay for school. So those are my 3 pieces of advice from the perspective of a player who has done it. And now we're going to talk about my perspective as a coach. So I started coaching right when I didn't make the team at CU academically, and I started coaching at Icon Lacrosse as well as Boulder Valley Lacrosse. And I coached there for 2 years, and then my youth teams, I think we won 2 championships. It was a pretty good time. So then I graduated school and I moved back home, and I got a job at a youth corrections facility as a youth corrections coach kind of thing. And so they also had a lacrosse program that was actually started by my brother 4 years previously. And so I got to coach their team. And then I got tired of the youth corrections facility, how it operated. It really just wasn't for me. And then I decided to focus on lacrosse full time. And so when I'm focusing on lacrosse full time, I really needed to find my avenue to kind of get into the community. And I followed, 3D Lacrosse on Twitter and saw that they were doing stuff at the Denver Shootout. And so I went out and I started taking notes on what 3D was doing at the Denver Shootout. And then Jamie Monroe, the same guy who pretty much influenced Goucher to recruit me, saw me taking notes and was like, hey, I would love for you to come help me coach at Mountain Vista High School. So then I got an assistant coaching job at Mountain Vista. I coached there for 2 years. And then I decided I was going to try to be a head coach. I moved and I went to coach at Grandview High School, where I'm the head coach there now, and I've been there for 2 years, and this upcoming season will be the 3rd year. So in my coaching experience, I've been lucky enough to coach at places that had absolutely no thoughts of recruiting, where no one was going to go. We just wanted to play the game, as well as with one of the most prolific recruiting style companies in the modern game. And so with that, there are a couple of observations that I have. One is the fact that there are 3 different types of player, and we're going to go through those players, and each little piece will have some advice on, if you are that player, here's kind of how you should look at things. So the 3 kinds of players are A, players who we know are going to get recruited. They've been the kids who've been recruited since they were in 7th grade. Everybody knows them, and they're going to have offers from a ton of different schools. The second group of kids are the kids who want to play in college but are unsure of how to get noticed and which school they want to pick and all of those types of things. The third group of players are players who are just playing in high school and they don't really have any intention on going and playing in college. So for the first group of players, the players who, are those all-American kids who everyone knows is going to get recruited, to them, I say that you're going to have a ton of options. The odds of you being a player who is that good, you put a ton of work in, and a bunch of different programs are going to want to bring your work ethic into their program. They're going to want to have kids just like you. So it's important to remember these 2 things. One, you don't have to rush your decision. Don't make a decision so early that you might end up having to change later. You can actually just take your time. If you are that good and you are that kind of player, a coach will make a new roster spot on his team for you. If you call him up and say, hey, I'd rather go to your school instead, is there a spot for me? You might not be able to get a scholarship there, but at least you'll be able to make the right decision for you. The second thing about these is that you want to make sure that you are really picking a school based on the personality of the school and that it will fit you, not on your understanding of what the media provides as the best lacrosse team. Syracuse, Duke, DU, UNC, all of these programs, Maryland for sure, all of these programs have prolific lacrosse teams, but they're not for everybody. And just because you're a lacrosse player who is really good, it doesn't mean that you're going to fit in really well with the lifestyle at any of these schools. So it's important that you do your due diligence to pick the right school. In my experience coaching, I've come across 2 very different players that fit this bill. One was a player who graduated last year, and since he was a freshman, he was recruited to go to Air Force. And as he grew through high school, he realized, I really probably made that decision pretty hastily when I was 14 years old to go to Air Force. I don't really want to do that anymore. And so he ended up changing and going to Salisbury, where he is now. The next player is one who was extremely patient. Now, this player decided to commit in the summer between his junior and senior year. So right when you think you want to make the decision of going to college. And he decided he wanted to go to Georgetown. And then actually this last summer, where he's actually going to be going to a prep school now, he decided that he wanted to change his decision and go to Brown. So even if you do get recruited and decide you want to go to a specific school, understand that you still have the opportunity to change your mind even if you do get into your senior year. The bottom line is, if you realize that that's probably not the place for you, don't go to that school. The second group of players that we're going to talk about is the C group, and these are the players who, they really love the sport, they want to play, but they don't have any intention in playing in college. And for these players, I say this: you have to still make sure that you're working just as hard as the kids who do want to go to college and play, because at the bottom line, in the competitive nature of, the entire high school lacrosse environment, we're going to play the best players. And you're not just given time at the varsity level. If you want to play on the lower levels where there's, a lot more time to be thrown around, that's absolutely fine. But if you want to play on the varsity level, you have to work at it just as much as someone who wants to go to college to do it. It's never just going to be given to you. Last year, we had a player who didn't end up going to college to play lacrosse, who was one of our starting attackmen. He was an absolutely awesome lefty, and he played all the time. He never had the intent of going to play in college, but he still had that competitive atmosphere where he really wanted to just succeed and play and have fun at the high school level. And now we're going to talk about the B group, and this is the group that I interact with mostly, because most players aren't that all-star who's always going to get recruited, and for the most part, a lot of players who play in high school do have intentions of playing in college. And so to preface this, I just want to say that I tell every single person within my lacrosse teams that if they want to play in college, they're going to have the opportunity to find the school that will allow them to play in college. And so I like to talk with a bunch of my players, and one of my players came to me in between his junior and senior year, and he was freaking out because he hadn't gotten a lot of letters and he just didn't know how he was going to accomplish this goal of playing in high school. And a lot of his angst and anxiety came from the fact that he had a lot of belief systems that just kind of weren't really true. He was seeing a lot of the social media about other kids getting recruited, and it totally just ruined his own self-worth of himself and the belief that he could actually go play in college. So there are 4 things that I like to make sure I tell my players to kind of reorient how they're thinking so that they can be less stressed as they're trying to think about the recruiting process. The first thing that I like to tell these players is that if you're willing to put in the work that is required to play at one of these schools, there's going to be a school that will match your interests and allow you to play lacrosse. And I think that is hugely important, that players have the belief that there is a school that's exactly right for them and that the work ethic that they can put in will allow them to reach the height of playing college lacrosse. The second thing that I tell them is not to mind the media attention and hype over D1, D2, and D3. Well, so D1 gets all the attention, right? D2 and D3, they get a little bit of attention on the Sunday during Memorial Day, and that's about it. But so a lot of kids grow up, and the only teams they know about are the Syracuse, Dukes, UNCs. And those teams, a lot of these players, they just don't have the work ethic to even enjoy life and playing lacrosse at that school. And that's kind of the bottom line, is if you're not putting in the work already to be seen as a player who those teams would like, the odds of you really enjoying going to school and playing lacrosse there are pretty slim to none. A lot of them just think that they want it because they get to say, ooh, I go and I play D1 and I'm at Duke and I'm that cool, when they should be focusing on the experience that they're going to have. And for most, and I mean most, probably I'd say 98% of high school lacrosse players, they don't want to have 3-a-days. They don't want to have to get up at 5 a.m., lift, then go to class, and then at noon have a practice, and then go to class, and then, at 5 o'clock they have another practice, and then they have to do homework all night. A lot of kids aren't going to like that. So if you're not putting in the work now, it's important that you find a school that is going to allow you to bring the work ethic that you have into that specific program. So the third thing that I like to tell these players is that if you are one of those players who just thinks that they absolutely have to play D1, and maybe it's the fact that there's some social pressure from a parent, where a parent went to a certain school and now they have to go to this certain school and they want to play lacrosse there, and that's like hugely important to them. I've got this, and I call this the Rudy principle. And if you haven't seen the movie Rudy, first you need to ask yourself why and what it is you're doing with your life, because it's a tremendous movie. But I have these players watch Rudy and see how he actually went about going to play football for Notre Dame. And I mean, he spent a ton of time obsessing over it. He went to another school for 3 years to get his grades up in order to get into the admission process. Once he was actually into Notre Dame, he had to go through just hectic things where he just, he pretty much just had that work ethic where nothing was ever going to stop him. And I mean, this kid trying to play football for Notre Dame, I think they say he's like 5'5" and 150 pounds. So he's clearly not cut out athletically and physically to be a Notre Dame football player. But it's a true story about a guy named Rudy who actually does it. And so for these players who have that ideal that they just have to go D1, if they have the work ethic, it can absolutely happen. The fourth thing that I like to tell them is to reorient how they think about all of the social media that they see. So for the most part, all of these players are on Instagram and Twitter and all these things, and there's tons of posts about congratulations to XYZ player for their commitment to Brown, UNC, or Duke. And a lot of players get extremely, self-conscious because they haven't gotten those letters and they haven't received those tweets. And a lot of them feel like because another person has taken up a place playing college lacrosse, that means that there's a more likelihood that they won't be able to do it. When in reality, that actually just proves the fact that players who are playing in high school are getting to go play college lacrosse. And if they can start to think about it as something that is proving that other high school players can get recruited and go play in college, which means that they can get recruited and play in college, I think that they'll have a much less stressful time when they're seeing all of these other players who are getting recruited when they're not. And the bottom line is, until about your senior year, if you're most players, if you haven't committed by that time, you're right on time. a lot of players don't commit until their senior year. For the majority of people, don't commit till their senior year. And so it's important that they don't read too much into the social media aspects of all of these kids getting recruited when they're in 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. So finally, we're going to talk about my opinion on the general state of recruiting. And so first and foremost, like a lot of people, I think it's absolutely despicable, especially what's being done at the Division I level. There's just no way that a 14-year-old knows what he wants out of a college experience. Most seniors in high school don't know what they want out of a college experience, and it's almost like taking advantage of the fact that you can excite a 14-year-old kid that you want him to come to the school. I get the idea of you want the best players to come to your school, and by locating them earlier, you're going to get to have them, but it's not humane, I feel. It's way over the top. I don't like it at all. Another aspect of this is that early recruiting leads most players to feel that they're way behind when really they're right on time. Any player who's a junior, a lot of them, most juniors are freaking out about the fact that they haven't gotten into a college yet. They don't know where they're going to be recruited, when I'm pretty sure that don't colleges have to wait until, what is it, their senior year until they can actually start talking to the player? So, a lot of these players who have a lot of anxiety based on the fact that they haven't committed to a college yet really shouldn't even be thinking that way in general. But this early recruiting thing has totally created the idea that if you're not recruited by, your sophomore year, that you're never going to be able to play in college. And it's a misconception, but it's absolutely there. The final thing that I have to say about this is that all of the companies who do a tremendously good job of showcasing kids that are good enough to play in college in order to get them recruited are all still going to be there doing the exact same job if kids are getting recruited at 17, 18 as they are 14, 15. And so the bottom line is these programs do a tremendous job of showcasing the talent and getting college coaches to come and see the talent and getting those kids who should be going to these schools to those schools. The key thing to realize is that we don't have to be doing it at 14, and that's, I think, the biggest issue, is that if we really embrace the rules of no contact until junior, senior year, whenever it actually is, the best players would still end up going to the best schools. So that's my take on the recruiting atmosphere and a couple ways we can help with the mental anxiety for players who would like to get recruited. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to hear what you have to say, so make sure that you leave a comment down in the comment section, or you can email me at patrick@powlax.com. Make sure to check out POWLAX on all brands of social media: YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and have a good one. I will see you in the next video.